Hello everybody, this is Fuji here and welcome to this video and welcome to the channel. Today we have a computer before us. This is a Lenovo ThinkCentre M73, I believe. It is a small form factor computer system, as you can plainly see. I was gifted this computer not very long ago actually by a pretty good friend of ours, and she was gifted it by a friend of hers. And she had no desire to keep it and no desire to utilize it for anything, so knowing me, she reached out to me and brought it over and said, hey, do you want this? And subsequently I would never turn down an opportunity to explore and discuss a computer, and I, based upon its specifications, well, nothing to write home about. It's perfectly eligible for a project at some point in the future. So, we're going to have a look at this cosmetically, and we're going to just see what all it has going on for it. There's nothing particularly interesting in this system. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill office-grade PC, but how it's spec'd out is what makes it a pretty good talking point. So, let's go ahead and show you the rear I/O of the system. The rear I/O of the system is equipped with a pretty good amount of features. It's got a serial port, a VGA port, 2 full-size display ports. It would have had provisions for an HDMI port if it had that board revision, possibly utilized in another board in the similar chassis form factor that they might have offered in a different revision of this machine. It would have had, probably in an older machine, a PS2 mouse and keyboard port. It has a whole world of USB 3 ports on the back, 4 of them, 2 USB 2.0 ports, and an Intel network interface controller, Gigabit. It's very nice that this is Intel. I'm not a big fan of the Realtek network interface controllers. They don't play well with PXE instructions, but I suppose if you were just using it for basic connectivity, it would probably be just fine. We have line in, audio out, and microphone in as well. Right here might have been a breakout port for an additional serial port that might be existent on this board via a header, or it might not be on this board revision at all. On the front of the system, it's just your typical office-grade simplicity, which is not a bad thing at all. 2 USB 3.0 ports, again, very nice. Microphone and headphone jack, power button, optical drive, just a CD DVD burner, combo drive, nothing special there. Just exactly how it would have come out of the box. Now, these machines are quite toolless. They were designed for the technician in mind, for serviceability and things like that. So a lot of things are very easily accessible. Very few screws are required. Only when you really need to get down to the nitty-gritty of things do you really need a screwdriver to access any of those features. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you how easy it is to pop the top off here. Let me just adjust the camera angle and I'll show you how to do that. Now typically there would be 2 screws securing the side panel to the chassis, but for just the sake of the demonstration of this computer, I've removed those for ease of access. But you see right here we have a button, and the button just simply depresses, and there's a piece of spring steel under there that actuates, probably right here somewhere, a mechanism that allows you to just simply slide it backwards and lift it away from the system. Now, you might be seeing some pretty impressive memory in here. That's because, for the time, this was actually pretty nice stuff. I had this lying around. This was in a build that I had in service a couple of years ago. And I put it in a static bag and put it on my parts shelf. And I had it listed for sale at one point. But because it just never moved, I took it off and there it sat in a static bag for the remainder of that time. When this came into my possession, it already had 16 gigabytes of DDR3 1600 megahertz memory in there. This is 1600 megahertz Corsair Vengeance memory. There's absolutely nothing special about this other than the fact that the heat sinks were quite functional if you wanted to overclock the memory if you had a system that supported overclocking and XMPP profiles. So there's a total of 32 gigabytes in this system. 2 of these blue sticks were put in under my own volition just because they were sitting around doing absolutely nothing, benefiting nobody. It has a very dubious, kind of oddly, comically so, SSD in here. The previous owner must have, assuredly, put this in as an upgrade, but it's no SSD that I've ever heard of. It's a generic company, probably one of those eBay specials, called King Red. And after a little bit of research, it's now a defunct name, and they don't sell them under this name anymore. Assuredly, they probably sell them under a multitude of different names. There's probably many generics that are exactly the same thing. This is just King Red, is what they chose to put on this at the time. And the reason why it's just kind of comical and kind of undesirable in a system like this is because the caching and the just solid state controllers, the NAND flash is extraordinary. This is an extraordinarily slow SSD. This machine is 4th gen Haswell. By no means a new system, but this, for the time, would have been more than suitable to saturate a SATA 6 SSD, but this thing won't even get off the ground and saturate maybe even a quarter of this controller's bandwidth. And after doing a few tests, I can verify that this thing's not I/O bound in any kind of way. There's no fault with the system. This drive is just horribly slow. And I verified this by utilizing another drive for testing that I had lying around. And there lied the problem. So this will be coming out. When? I'm not entirely sure. I don't really have an immediate use for this just yet. And you know what would be great is if my neighbors didn't decide to do contracting work and framework to their house whenever I decide to pick up the camera, so I hope you do forgive me in that regard. So getting to the internals of the system is very easy. You basically just kind of take it to the edge of a desk, right? And then there are these 3 tabs. You start out with the first 2, and you just gently lift up with a bit of tension, doesn't take any at all. Then you take the middle one, and it comes right off with these little plastic hinges. You know, everything's easier said than done. There we go. Just took a little finesse. Then, right here, there's another spring steel tab. You push this down, and you hinge up. This locks into place, and you can access the hard drive, the optical drive, and the rest of the motherboard components. You can actually get another angle of the obscenely tall heatsinks on this Corsair Vengeance memory. It is running at 1600 megahertz. The stock memory was 1600 megahertz, and they just so happen to both have the same timings. So it's just the same memory as far as, performance is concerned, just with some glitz and glamour that no one will ever see. A very nice assortment of expansion. You have one PCI Express 16X slot, wired as such, 16X. There's one PCI Express 1X slot, wired as such, 1X. There's a PCI Express slot wired in 8X, And then there's a PCI 32-bit slot if you have something of a legacy device that you'd like to run in the system. Power supply is rather anemic. It's suitable to run a passively powered GPU. And when I say passively powered, I mean passively powered. Do not under any circumstances try to shove a GPU in a system like this and then try and piggyback PCI Express power from, say, a SATA header or any kind of a Molex header that you might encounter in the system. You will overburden the power supply, and the power supply will not be long for this world. There are plenty of options to give this particular system some more graphics horsepower, but the integrated Intel graphics for what I'm planning on using this for are going to be more than enough, especially because there are 2 full-size display ports on here, and most of the displays on my desk utilize full-size display ports, so it's just going to be a match made in heaven as far as I'm concerned. The CPU is an Intel Core i7 4790K Haswell era CPU, so 4th gen, as I stated before, not really that remarkable. It's a quad core with hyperthreading, so 4 physical cores and 4 virtual cores, giving it 8 threads. Got 8 megs of cache. It was your standard run-of-the-mill i7. There's no K, and I'm sorry, it's not a K, it's just a 4790. A K would mean that it would have its multiplier unlocked, and in a business machine with a board that does not support any kind of alteration to those parameters, it would be pointless to put a K CPU in here. If the board even supported the microcode for that CPU at all. Probably would, but there's no point in trying, and I don't have one anymore. So, a 4790 is exactly what I'm putting in here. Now, and what I'm leaving in here. I've saw to removing the old thermal compound. It was as crusty and dry as you would expect it to be. I saw to seeing if there was any underlying dust underneath this baffle. Now, this baffle doesn't look as obnoxious as it seems. You can simply pull back on these tabs and remove the baffle as such, thus making cleaning a breeze. You can use an air duster, you can use a electric cleaning blower, you can use a compressor, whatever you want to use. Just make sure that that fan stays put as you're blowing compressed or rapidly flowing air into the system. You don't want any back voltage or back current going through the header as not to damage the board. I went ahead and replaced the CMOS battery, and it's pretty much just standard fare. The only exhaust that the system has is basically what this baffle will channel out the back where all of these ventilation holes are. This would explain the kind of Swiss cheese ventilation that the PCI Express blanking plates would have too. Ventilation is pretty well limited here. You have one intake fan coming through the front, but really it's just sort of a push-pull configuration. The power supply will pull out and go out its back end, but that's only responsible for cooling itself. I suppose some exhaust from the rest of the system, possibly around the VRMs, could be, had with the power supply, but this is new enough where it wouldn't get that hot for this to need to have any kind of any say in exhausting anything. In fact, if this was relocated somewhere else, or say this fan was pointing in a completely different direction, the performance of that ventilation fan would be negligible and only utilized on just for cooling the power supply itself, which is a 275 watt light-on power supply rated for 80 plus bronze. So putting the machine back together again is just as simple as taking it apart. You're going to put that bezel back on. as such. You're going to go ahead and take that tab, which is right here, and you're going to tilt it down. It's a little bit finicky sometimes, but just work it. There we go. And then tilt it down as such, as to make sure that none of the cables are pinched. These are pretty cable managed, so they can just be hinged up and down freely without much of a concern for that. Then you're going to take your front panel bezel and you're just going to kind of drop it into place with the three tab hinges on the bottom and snap it into place in the front. Then you're going to take your side panel, of course, the final step, align it properly with the tabs, and push it into place until you feel a firm and satisfying clunk from the latch button here. And if you have screws like I do to the side, you would place those in the corresponding holes at this time. Now that we've seen an overview of this system, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to be using the system for. I'm not going to be using it as a daily driver for anything per se. None of my machines use anything new, use anything older than DDR4. So this is a bit archaic in comparison to what I'm using right now. The only thing that I can think of at this point is to utilize and get refamiliarized with the Debian operating system. I run it on virtual machines and VMware Workstation and other means of emulation and stuff like virtualization and stuff like that. I also run it as a service running Docker and containers and things, but it never has. But when you're running it Dockerized and containerized, you don't typically have, if ever, a desktop environment to work with. It's all just text-based, which is how it should be. The lighter, the better. So it might be nice to just be able to have a very supported experience with the Debian 13 operating system, codenamed Trixie. That just recently got debuted, probably within the last month. From what I've used it in virtual environments, it worked quite well. And I think that it would be a nice experience, especially with despite the processor's age, and the Debian tends to work on pretty well on very aged systems and very new and contemporary systems, whatever you decide to put on it. So it's just a matter of selecting the appropriate desktop environment and choosing the jobs for the machine appropriately. Having 32 gigabytes of RAM in a Debian system is a little bit overkill. I understand this. However, the memory wasn't doing anybody any good just sitting on a shelf in a static bag gathering dust, so why not give it a home? I'll go ahead and label the specifications of this system, probably with a post-it or a piece of masking tape, and I'll just kind of tape it to the inside of the machine. That way I know what's in it. So when I need to call it into service for some particular reason, I'll know exactly what I'm dealing with should I forget. And that happens a lot, especially when you're keeping track of a lot of system units. So this was a brief overview of a Lenovo ThinkCentre M73 small form factor computer system from the 4th gen Haswell era. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. If you have one of these, I'd love to hear what you use it for. If you think that it's just complete e-waste and I should throw it away, you could put that opinion down there below too. And typically I would agree with you, but being what all the system has going on for it, in regards to its system resources, I don't think I'm inclined to do that just yet. I think there's a few years left in this machine to do exactly what I have in mind for it, and I think it's going to do pretty well. If I have any updates on this machine, I'll let you know in another video. I'm not going to demonstrate installing any kind of an operating system on here, because anybody who knows how to install an operating system on any kind of a computer will know that it's just the same process as far as any other system unit goes. That's not interesting. And benchmarks just give superfluous information, and being 4th gen Haswell, there's not much newer software can compare it to unless you go roll back to an older revision of software that would benchmark the CPU with then relevant CPUs. It doesn't make a difference to me. So yeah, it'll just be what it is, a stable. I know these to be very stable. M73s are a lot of systems that I took out of a client office and serviced in a client office for a couple of years. They just stayed on and did exactly what they were supposed to, even in the most unreasonable conditions before I got there. So I'm going to end this here. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment if you have one. And if anything comes of the system where I'm going to be doing something particularly interesting with it, I will let you know in a future video as previously stated. So, take care everybody. Thanks for watching. This is Fuji, signing out.